Thank you very much for being here today and for being a part of Conn-Selmer and CSI Connect, whether you're a returning person or this is the first time you've ever done it. It's just it's so remarkable to have you join, and I appreciate with a lot of the things that are being offered today that you would pick my session to attend and you'd be here. So hopefully we'll get some good things for you. I will do a kind of a balance of some slides and some videos to maybe offer you some things that you can do with your students online. If you didn't catch my name, I'm Jarrett Littman, and I am the band director at Claudia Taylor Lady Bird Johnson High School. It's here in San Antonio. We're on the north side of town, and I've been at the school since it opened in 2008, and just really been remarkable to watch the program grow and to be a part of that. And Alan Sharps is kind of my partner in crime, and just retired this year and has been teaching for 40 years and was at Churchill prior to being at Johnson. And we've been at the school together. And both of us were actually transplants to Texas. I moved to Texas from New Jersey, and Alan moved down from Virginia. Both of us wanted to have that connection and to learn more from the state. And we've put down roots, and you know, my family loves coming down to visit. And so I've learned a lot from being in Texas, but also having the opportunity to start to travel around more and to go to different states, whether it's judging or going out to clinic. It's just a blessing to be able to see what people are doing. And so kind of what I wanted to offer today were just the things that, you know, if let's say you're going to be in distance learning or some combination, these are things that we've been doing since quarantine started. We met with our students to give you an idea. We're very fortunate with technology, and I'm going to try this survey thing and see, speaking of technology, just as an idea, I started a survey, what % of your students have access to technology or they're there? We were in if you can answer it, I think it's probably popping up on your screen right now. If not, Elisa might be able to help with that. Within our band program, we're just over 300, and we had about 8 kids that did not have access to technology. And so we did all of our packets and were able to get things out. But what we learned through the process was if we asked for help from some of our parents that were maybe in a little bit better of a financial situation, we ended up having families that donated Chromebooks and lent out iPads. So we were able to, by the end, get all of our students on some kind of technology. And the internet thing and working around scheduling was a challenge, but I definitely feel like a lot of the things that we did were successful because we were able to, even if it was once every other week and we were able to see those students, we wanted to get no poll. Publish? Now publish. Let's see if that one's live. I clicked publish. That might have been what I needed to do. There it is. And so with the percentage of our students that were on technology by the end, what I'm going to go through are things we did with an understanding that you could do Zoom or do some kind of Google Meets or Google Hangouts, or you do video assignments, and that your students have a way to be able to do that. If not, a lot of the things were applicable either in a handout or a packet that we delivered from our kids, but a lot of this stuff was on there. So just kind of looking at the poll, we're more than half of the room is at 75%, and then we've got some that are at less. And there are a lot of schools that are in our district where the students had very little technology or no access. And I feel like the middle schools and the high schools that were in that boat did a lot sharing with one another on how they would make that happen. And you know, someone talks about participation. I'm seeing some of the comments come in. I'll share a little bit more about just some of the things that we did with participation too. But I think that if you can, you know, if you have a way to be able to get your students on there, whether it's, you know, helping them link up with some internet access, if you've got a district maybe that has some extra money that's going to be there, and everybody's talking about budget cuts, but there are a lot of districts where if it's important enough, they'll find the money to make it happen. And I think that, you know, as much as you can advocate to be able to have that Zoom to Zoom, face to face, wherever it's going to be. I know some districts weren't comfortable with Zoom, Google Meets, wherever that is. So just kind of going through a couple of things with the PowerPoint, which will be available at the end if you hop in. So we talked a lot about this because it became really clear early that rehearsing ensemble wasn't going to be possible with our students, at least in a way that was practical. You know, being able to do the delay and coordinate that. And there's a lot of people that are working on that right now that we can synchronize our playing. We went back to basics about revisiting individual skills. So the top bands at Johnson, the top 3 groups met every day in woodwind and brass split. Wednesdays we'd put them together and we would kind of show off for each other what we had been working on. So 2 directors would split them up. We came up with a schedule that met when the students would normally have had band, which was first thing in the morning for the advanced students, and in the afternoon we had another director that moved that time to the morning. For us, we polled our students, and parents said they'd rather have the kids get it done within the day. They were up, and so you know, we mixed up as groups as small as 4 and 5 some days, and then larger groups. And you know, revisiting individual skills. We talk about this idea. Joe Dixon is our main trombone teacher and brass consultant, and he always says every day is a chance to reinvent your playing. So we talked to our students that every day that they were in quarantine was an opportunity to reinvent their playing. Some of them are not in situations where they were able to touch their instruments. There were major family issues. There were things that came up. And our advice at that point was always, don't worry about this stuff. Worry about family. And so, you know, individual time and making it about the one-on-one with the student, it puts less pressure with grading, which was not really a thing for us. We tried to not use that as other than when our district would require us to have at least a grade on because they wanted to make sure that we were doing something. But more often than not, let's say we're talking about the ideal student right now. They can log in. They are able to go. I would, you know, this is the list of what I made. I would be making your list of the things that you think are important that your kids have as individual skills to be better players. And when you start just making that list, you start coming up and realizing, hey, we could base assignments. Maybe it's a page of the Arbenz book, or maybe, you know, it's going to be a Coprage exercise that we're going to assign this week or something. So you could come up with pretty individualized lesson plans for your students, and then you can do video assignments, or you can do submissions where they listen. We did peer-to-peer grading a lot, so I would have the kids trade off and give comments, and I would check in on that so that I didn't end up having to grade 80 video assignments every day. It's a lot, and I tried to make it so that the work would not be more than what I would normally be doing. Those of you that did Zoom realize you may be doing more than you might have been during the year just with how the schedule was. And so with your students, we talked a lot about individual time, role models. So if you did listening assignments, this is a great time to talk about your favorite clarinet players, flute players, saxophone models. Give the kids an assignment, short, something that they can listen to. And maybe it's they write 3 sentences or no more, or you just do a discussion session in a Zoom talking about what they noticed about the player, guiding your feedback to get them to listen to the things that you want them to. So the importance of the characteristic sound, the importance of a great sound, if they've got some models and they've got this time during quarantine to be able to do it, that's a great opportunity to go through and to guide what you want them to sound like on their instruments. You will have a better understanding always of the end goal than they will. Individual practice habits. We have a list that Mr. Dixon created for us that goes through like 12 steps to creating a perfect practice environment. And a lot of that got thrown away when the kids were all living together in a family. Some people had 8 in a household. Finding a quiet place to practice wasn't possible, but they might still be able to find a tuner and a metronome to use, or be sitting in a chair. During the quarantine, some students, before it, they shut everything down. We lent out music stands to try to get them with that while we were still able to go to the campus. But now that Amazon has balanced, kids might be able to order those portable stands again if they don't have one. But talk to them about the importance of the individual practice habits. If your students are not on the Tonal Energy app, tonal energy has saved us during all of this. And some students don't have phones, and I know that. If they do and they can get tonal energy, it is rolling out new technology every day to guide individual practicing. It has a tool that checks their note shapes. It has a tool that looks at the grid of what they do and sees if they can play in tempo. It teaches them how to do just versus equal temperament intonation. And we always joke that if they play to that green smiley face, Mrs. Smiley face, that's going to be a good sign for them. And so the tonal energy guys I have been incredible for us and for what we've done. And it's available on the App Store, all different types of that. We figured out a way to be able to broadcast tonal energy through Zoom so that the kids could actually watch one another and they'd play the game of, is it in tune, is it in time, and the computer would do that. So I just feel like, this is the time that you can get back to teaching them how to practice again. And it's, with our youngest kids, we use the age-old analogy. If you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, he will eat for a lifetime. And this is that time that we've gone back to teaching the kids how to fish. A couple things with Zoom basics. If you don't have like a protocol with your students, and again, getting them on board with that is going to be important. Good eye contact, looking at the screen, making sure we can see the video if it's practical. Some of them don't want you to see in their house. Some of them it's not possible because they're on a phone. If it is possible, though, that you can monitor their eye contact and what they're doing, that's great. Regularly question and poll them, ask them, guide their listening by having individuals play, and then say, Bobby, can you answer and tell me what you heard about that? And it's a lot of dialogue and back and forth. And again, it's you guiding that and keeping them engaged. It's hard. I mean, even now as I go back and forth right now, we do the chat and I'm sitting and staring at a PowerPoint and I present. Ultimately, you're sitting in a chair staring at me talk to you. And that gets old really fast, especially when there's temptations of phone and you can have other windows open. We're all guilty of it. I did it on faculty meetings and I think that's a piece of it. So let's say you've got that stuff kind of established. I'm going to play a video from the last session. Someone asked, I'm just seeing that, am I sharing? Everything will be shared. So if the handout is not available, I'll have a Google Drive out or Dropbox that I will be able to provide all the stuff, and Conn-Selmer is providing that. So anything that you see today, if you miss it, you don't get long enough to read it, it'll be there. You can have it, or you can email me back and I'll be able to get it for you. So ear training exercises, I talked about that in the last session. If you were not here, just a demonstration of what some of the singing things that we did using a software called Acapella. We did a lot of singing in solfege during all of this.
Do 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 re do do ti do mi do do re do do ti do mi do do re do do ti do 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 ti do do so do.
And so that video was one of the students doing a 4-part canon. It's a single line starting at different times and using the metronome to be able to lock that in. We did a lot of that with playing too, which I'll show you here. But I think somebody asked, is there an Android version? There is a version of it for Android. I know that because we've got a bunch of our students that submitted it on that. Another one of my favorite exercises, it's a James Thompson book called The Buzzing Book. And this, for the brass players, woodwinds, it could work because they could be doing different things. But this was a really cool one on how to engage the brass. So this is us doing this one in person live, but we did it over Zoom where I would broadcast the audio file through Zoom and the kids would do this one together. So let's see if this locks in and goes. And this is one of those exercises. I remember talking to Gino about this when we first did it. Gino's the music director, brass caption head at Boston, and he kind of giggled and rolled his eyes. And when I can't believe that you're doing this, it's like these elevator type recordings, but they have melodies. And this book has got like 40 melodies that it goes through. It's called The Buzzing Book. It's James Thompson. And when you buy it, you get a whole folder full of all of the audio recordings. And it's different patterns, really advanced. And when I do that with my brass players first thing in the morning, it puts them in a good mood. More than me talking, I just start that and they get to play along with that. And they're just delightful little tunes, and they've got different rhythmic subdivisions. So that was a Mr. Dixon introduction of that. And we give those out to our students, in terms of the exercises, and then the recordings, we play along with that. So that's been a big piece of what we've done during that with brass. So next, for long tones, people would ask what we were doing for our long tone exercises. We would do a lot of, if I pick up my euphonium and I would play Remington down, where I would have a student start it with a metronome and they would model it, and then the students would be on mute and they would play back. That was a pretty common thing during Zoom. And some people go, well, you can't hear the kids. Does that matter? For us, it was about keeping them busy. It was about getting them so that they were staying on top of their daily drill and they were going through those fundamentals. And by mixing up the kids, I'd give a little bit of feedback. Sometimes we would have them play through the whole exercise straight through, and the kids would accompany along on mute. We tried a little bit with having two play at once. That was about as many as I was able to get. If the kids had exactly the same amount of delay, you could synchronize that up and that would work. We also did things where we would broadcast the drone through tonal energy, have them play things against that, and that worked really well. So I think keeping your long tones going is huge. Looking a little bit at some of the articulation things, I think ultimately anything that you do is going to be good. But if you go through articulation, this is another great time, crash course, to go back and review that articulation is style. So whatever they do in terms of tonguing, that's going to create the style of the music. You hear a lot of times people will be trying to play something smooth and the kids are just chopping it up, young players. And this is a great time to go back to talk about the mechanics of that. You can see in their faces what they're doing. For us, we use ta and to as a default, da and do for legato. Whatever it is that your default plan, you can use that with them. And in reviewing that in the basics. So maybe it's, for a week, you're really focusing on reteaching articulation again. This fall could be a time where you take all of your high school or middle school kids back to beginner class and start over again. And even the ones that are bored, we always go back to basics and try to revisit. So in the PowerPoint, you'll see we use one of the standard articulation series that Mr. Green and a lot of his faculty members back at Lake Highlands that they adopted, and Mr. Bennett has adopted. We mix in all kinds of different patterns with this. My only purpose for showing you is that you cover different bases. So maybe it's a B flat scale in touching notes one day, lifted notes, staccato notes. I like doing this every day with them because it makes them think every day about different types of note lengths and articulations with that. A variation on that where you break things down into structure, more great individual exercises. So if you look at number 3, for example, 3 breaks down triplets. And it builds it one note at a time. You can listen to your kids play this as individuals, give them feedback, and then they're able to go through all of that. So kind of figuring out smaller chunks and smaller cells. These also were great for video assignments. We might say, today, flutes and clarinets, you guys are going to record number 4. You're going to trade that off, and you're going to give one another feedback on that. And then that's their assignment. And in my graduate school classes right now, we're having to write things, and then we evaluate somebody else's work. So a lot of that peer-to-peer feedback, I think, is really great. Chorales. Obviously, we can't do a chorale together right now. And so going back to video, someone's asking some of these questions. These are so cool as we go through. And, somebody writes there is a younger version of the Buzzing Book for baby players. That's great. Probably need to look at that with some of the older ones too. That would be really good. For staccato syllables, I've been a proponent of ta or tut. I've used tut sometimes, but I know that people have been successful using da or dut. It just comes down to, that you could go back and forth and, work through all of that. It's we don't have enough time to go through that one today. So, but if you want, I can Zoom with you one day and we can meet and talk more about articulation syllables. So here is looking at some chorale ideas. I'm going to have you, this is our chorale singing when we were still allowed to be together. Ready? And just for fun, let's do our scale in thirds. Do, mi, re, fa, mi, about that tempo. And 2, ready, and. Do, mi, re, fa, mi, so, fa, la, so, ti, la, do, ti, re, do, la, ti, so, fa, la, so, mi, fa, re, mi, do, re, ti, do. And so the chorale exercise in the last session, and Catherine, I played some videos of the students actually singing through all 4 parts of the chorale themselves and going and playing it. So we did it. Here is an example of a student playing all 4 parts of the Bach chorale using a cappella. And here is one where if you encourage creativity, and someone is actually putting up free chorales in the chat right now, because I know that'll be the next question. Where do you get the chorales? You can find them online. Bach chorales or public domain. And so let's take a look at this one. If you can encourage their creativity in what they do, they might surprise you with some of the things they come up with their chorales. It's kind of like a combination of Wayne Downey meets Bach, which is pretty cool. And when you get to a point, where you start letting them do those kinds of things, I didn't do that with him. He did that on his own and went through that and created that. I just think, when they start to figure out what the toys can do, then they're gonna start to do more of that stuff on their own. So someone asked about how do you get them introduced to that. In the beginner session I did yesterday, I went back to like super basics. So I can send out to anyone that wasn't able to do that, kind of the exercises and how I would do singing. If you have never tried it with your students before, if you're not comfortable with it, it's something at TBA, I'm going to do another presentation on that, because I think that a lot of times we are uncomfortable with getting that going, and you'd be amazed at how forgiving the kids are. So if you are going to learn alongside of them, they're going to love doing that with you. Someone asked about the Harmony Director and how we use it. I've not obviously been able to use it as much at home, so we've moved to the Tonal Energy app because it does a lot of those same things. In the classroom, we've done Tonal Energy, the Harmony Director at the front of the room, the back of the room, sides, kind of all over. We've got speakers set up. I do think if you're using it for tempo, behind the ensemble is going to be better, just for all kinds of reasons that we can talk about. But either way, that it's such a valuable tool. And so you can do the chorale. Let me get back into my PowerPoint here. The kids can learn to make that happen. This is a great time to talk about transposing. So once they learn their chorale in F, ask them to learn how to do it in B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, different keys without you writing it out. If these are middle school students, you just getting them in quarantine to a point of maybe where they can play their part to the individual chorale at a really high level would be incredible. And maybe then they can take a video and with 3 other people in a cappella, they could load those parts in. The kids has a feature that they can work together on that. The middle school kids are every bit as capable on technology, although sometimes not as confident. And sometimes, you know, the parent support is different because they don't always have the understanding of what it is. But I mean, the Bach chorales are freely available online. The kids can get those parts. They can learn all the parts. We do want them to learn the clefs and that. And with the lower bands, our third and our fourth band, we ask them really to detail and to learn their chorale and sing it at the highest level. And that, by the end of the year, was a big victory for them to be able to do that. So last piece is someone asked about technique, and I just getting into the process that we've used for scales, new especially this spring because we've been in quarantine, and our trombone professor, Mr. Dixon, it was really great at thinking about ways to make sure that kids are processing it on the level that we need to. He was commenting a lot that he felt like our students were coming into auditions, playing scales by memorizing positions and fingers and buttons and maybe not really understanding the theory behind the scale. And so for this spring, we would actually we'd dedicate time every day, name the key. So let's say we're the key of B flat. And if it was trumpet, then they would say, you know, C major for me. You know, and they're learning the transposition for saxophone and that, and really making a point to stick. They would have to identify concert B flat, 2 flats, and then they would have to identify B flat and E flat and name them. Then they would have to spell the scale: B flat, C, D, E flat, slowly, and finger along to position, which took a while for some of them to be able to do. Then for the advanced students, we would ask them to sing the scale on note names. If they were able to make that happen. For the younger students, we might have picked one scale that they learned to do that on. We would have them play the scale slowly with half notes using their just temperament intonation to find the adjustments. And then they would go to the normal do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And they would work up that way and back into our normal way that we do that. But by going back to the scales that way, someone asked about technique. We did a lot of with every band in high school, a lot of triple and double tonguing this year, teaching them the process on how to do that. Step 1, all on ta. Step 2, on da. And so that's not necessarily something that's important today, other than the theme of my message is that you go back, and every time that you were like, man, I wish they would just practice more. Sometimes it could be they're practicing, and you know this, but they're not practicing correctly. And sometimes you've taught them to practice, but as Archbishop likes to say, teenagers rely on repetition. They need it repeated. They will roll their eyes. They will think they know. And then you say, hey, can you repeat back what I just said? And they're staring blank at the screen. I mean, it never fails that they know until they have to repeat it back. And so, you know, just be thinking about that. My last piece is just on the smart music and the place that we used with it. We used it sparingly, but we do use it for our band music. There's some great exercises in there. I'd say if it's a situation you're in, they offered it up for free on a lot of it. If you can use it, it can be a little bit glitchy depending on microphone stuff. All technology is. But again, if you've got the chance to use it, it is a big piece of what we do. We did assignments all through quarantine, not graded for the purpose of intimidating them, but keeping them on board. And then the other thing that we did, and I'll show you this, was for each student, we did, this was what they submitted every week on Google Classroom or turned into the school, was a daily drill practice log. So they would list on each day of the week, I liked them to time how many minutes they were spending on that, and it made them mindful. And I'm not big into quantity over quality. but I am interested in they're sensitive to how much time at least they spend on a long tone or a lip slur, and that they don't cheat on it. And maybe if I notice that, like, hey, a lot of my brass players were skipping lip flexibilities or woodwinds were skipping tonguing, then I might go back and revisit that when I would see them. Very clear details. Some students read lists, some do not, but at least we're providing them with the feedback of what is the exercise, what details to focus on, and an estimate on how much time they should be spending on it. And if they could do, 25, 30 minutes a day, and that you can teach them how to practice this and in video assignments. I just didn't want to go through quarantine and have the students feel like they didn't know how to structure their practicing. With that said, from the very beginning, when we went away, we set off to do Zoom meetings for the purpose of just telling the kids we were there for them. It became more of like an opportunity to see each other, and there was very little talking about playing or concepts for the first week or two. Now that everyone's kind of used to this, the tendency maybe we want to jump right in, but I still think that the relationship and getting the students on board with how band and preparing for your ensembles and preparing for rehearsal, they signed up for your class because they love music. And if you can tap into that love, whether it's through contact with you or through their peers, or we're talking the big buzzwords of the current day are social emotional learning. That dropped in at some point, and now that's where we're running with it. So I'm on board the train if that's what it is. I just know that I think if you notice that kids are not coming, we asked our section leaders to call them and say, hey, are you guys okay? Is everything all right? If I noticed a kid wasn't there, I was on the phone with parents as fast as I could be, making sure that there wasn't something going on. And sometimes, it is that they overslept, and then, it's a little bit of a roast, and we tease them a little playfully with that. And hopefully that was all it was. But, just being cognizant. 2 books I love very much. One is On Teaching Band, Notes from Eddie Green, and another is Richard Floyd's The Artistry of Teaching Music. They're books that are kind of on opposite ends of the things that they talk about, and sometimes they disagree with one another. I think they're great, and I think if you've not read them on quarantine or over the summer, these 2 books will provide you so many insights on starting beginners, getting kids hooked into band, ideas for processes. This is great for conversation. We could sit, if another forum was open, and talk about the different points that the books make. If you've read them, read them again. I think they're so valuable in what they ask us to think about and what they do. Our program, we always say thank you to Mr. Bennett and to Gino Cipriani and Mr. Dixon. They've helped mentor me and mentor our program from day one until now. And then the ear training guys from Mason Grove School of the Arts and Central Connecticut State, Professors Kirshner, Urban, and Nicosia were profoundly influential on the kinds of things that we do, and they're great resources. These are names of people that I would say, if you're looking for ideas of what to do with your kids, you can reach out to these guys. They have built CTJ alongside with us. And then I said, in all of the sessions, just a huge thank you to Conn-Selmer and what they've done, bringing together over 2,000 of us in over the last couple of months, and Tim and Nola and all of the clinicians that are here. It's incredible. And I'm so happy to have been asked to be a part of it. I would have been a part of it as an attendee if I were not presenting a little bit. But we just are really fortunate to have this, and I would imagine it's probably one of the largest things of its kind, if not what it is. So just thank you to everybody for putting that together. I've got a couple minutes left to try to save it for questions. So the first question was about the books. Here, I'll put those back up again if anybody wants to, for some reading. Actually, I think I might have clicked. Let's see. Navigating technology. Here we go. And by my 3rd session, I finally got good at this. Eddie Green on Teaching Band, Dr. Cavett. Dr. Cavett was actually a fine arts director in our district before she became a vice president at Texas State University. She edited it, and Dr. Tim did the forward. So it's great. And then Mr. Floyd was the director of UIL Music. It really is responsible for why UIL is what it is today, and why Texas bands are what they are. There have been so many people that have influenced it, but these guys, they're the real thing, and a lot of us have been shaped by what they've done. You got two schools of thought. Everything is about the music and everything is about training the technicians. And if you can figure out how to read this and synthesize both. Someone asked, how did we develop technique in that? These two books and reading through them and trying to apply, inspiring kids to love music and making it all about inspiration for music and passion, and making sure it's special for them, and by the same token, making sure they have the tools to do it. We all want to make great musical memories with our students, and I feel like at the end of the day, with Mr. Bennett and Mr. Dixon and Mr. Green, having the tools to know what to tell a kid. Okay, that doesn't sound right. I know it doesn't sound right. I'm telling them, so instead of going, it sounds like, puffy clouds, I want it to sound, more aggressive, or saying that's creamy peanut butter, can you make it chunky? Mr. Dixon might go, we need to tongue firmer with more front, more focus on air down the center of the tongue, and put that articulation right behind where the enamel meets the teeth. And I'm like, mind blown. And a kid does it, and some combination of peanut butter and feedback, and it pops out at the end. And so, you're going to find in both books examples on both sides of it, and I think that they're great. There's my plug on that. Someone's posted about acapella. If you want to try acapella, you can check that out. Flipgrid, we have a lot in our district that used Flipgrid. Dale asked about acapella. So acapella, I don't have the ability to pull it up right now, but it basically, one screen at a time, kind of like the Brady Bunch. The kids will get a metronome, and it can click, or it can be audible only in their ear, and they record their part. Once they lay down the first track, when they go to do the first track plays in their ear with the metronome while they record the second. And then they do the third, they have the first and second, and so on. They can do that as many tracks as they want. You can also do it where one student records, and then they put it up in a shared folder, and 4 different students record the parts. And it's got limitations. There's a free version of it, and then there's a not free version. And I'm imagining there's just going to be a ton of other things like that do this. Rosalie asks about distance learning for beginners. I would, if you can get on the phone with every single student, or you have a couple of parents that can help, or a couple of other band directors or teachers, maybe you borrow a couple friends. Like, I know we're in time of FERPA, so some of that is really hard to make happen. I would try to be on the phone talking to parents and inviting kids to be a part of it. I feel like on so many levels, we get stuck behind the technology and the email, but the phone call, at least you can hear the person's voice, and you can get them involved. And so inviting them onto a session and inviting them to do something face to face, I think is going to be the way to start with that. I would use as much, human to human contact as you can make. Rhonda asks about the YouTube video of my band singing. I actually do. I have that chorale that's on YouTube. I'll put my email in the chat. I know that they posted it. You can ask, and I can send that to you. If you just send, I'll respond back with the YouTube link. You can share that with them. And those videos, the kids have all okayed. Middle school's tough. I talked about that yesterday. The first thing is small groups. Middle school kids, no kid, but middle school especially, they don't like being embarrassed. So when I do singing at Tex Hill and Tejada or Bradley, if I'm introducing it, I'm doing it in groups of no more than 6 to 8. So maybe sectionals, or I just go, and while the band's playing, I pull out 5 kids, and we just sit with the piano and go down the line, and I help them get to a point of maybe they can do a single note. I think a lot of times the kids will, if they buy into you, they're going to giggle a little bit. They're going to laugh. And as soon as you can take them through that, I've gotten to a point with our middle school guys where I'm like, all right, everybody's going to laugh. Don't laugh. Everybody's going to giggle. Don't giggle. And so they'll do that. Initially, laughter took a week or 2 to get rid of, but then they start becoming amazed at what they can do. And it becomes fun, like with anything else. So The smaller groups will take away some of the awkwardness, helping the boys figure out falsetto. If I do it, then they can do it. And all of a sudden, it's not a big deal. I make sure that I sing plenty and my voice cracks so they can hear that. And then, if Mr. Lippman does it, at least they're not alone with it. So it's just creating that environment for them. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. But it's like with anything else, we're someone sitting in the shade, because someone planted a baby tree a long time ago. Baby steps, start small, and kind of hang in there with that. Looking to see. Percussionists, a great question. So our percussionist met with we've got one of our other band directors that specializes in that. And if I didn't have that, I'd be doing the exercises that he did. We were able to either get them back on their bell kits from 6th grade. Every one of them had a bell kit. Or we were doing a rotation at the beginning. We rotated out, broke down keyboards, and sent stuff home with as many of them as humanly possible. And he would do a weekly curriculum where there were exercises on their drum pad, something on their bell kit. If they had access to a snare drum or a bass drum, he worked to really making sure that we train bass drum technique or triangle technique. How many times do you have the opportunity to be able to go back and train individual triangle technique or things that maybe the kids would normally roll their eyes at? And so with the singing stuff, we expect our percussionists to be able to do that too. Meeting in the smaller groups, they met together homogeneously to try to do that stuff and to have that happen. Someone's asking about beginner bassoon stuff. Yeah. Beginner bassoon and how to teach them that. It's going to be interesting. I know, one of our other band directors is a bassoon player, and he's already trying to go through like videos of step-by-step how to take it out of the case and kind of what to do with that and how to get the parents involved. And I don't even pretend to have the answer on that. I imagine there's going to be a lot of discussions that have to happen with that. And I can tell you with beginner brass players, it's I won't say it's easier, but a little bit over the Zoom thing we're able to do. But I would imagine if you look on the chat right now, there's going to be some people that are popping out bassoon resources. Someone brought up about FERPA. Yes, FERPA was a big thing for us. FERPA, our district determined, did meet their standard with some of the revisions that went on, or if not, then we had to do disclaimers with our students that it was not required and that they did a waiver that they were consenting to doing it. It was short, and that was early on in the process. Our district felt that the value of Zoom outweighed some of the challenges that we were going to have to go through. So some of what we talked to the kids about is, appropriate attire, appropriate dress, making sure, someone doesn't walk out of the shower and walk behind the screen. And those are the risks and the realities of online technology that we're all going to be working with. And I can't say that I ever feel 100% comfortable with it, but nobody does right now. And as long as our administration and our district is supportive, I have it in writing, I rolled ahead with it. Peer-to-peer grading. On that last note, I know that Barry Morgan and some of the other folks that are out presenting about this on the legal side, there's tons of different resources that are starting to pop up about protecting yourself and liability insurance. And we all kind of need to become experts in that as we make this move, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth. Peer-to-peer grading, structure the guidelines. It's never going to be perfect. Kids teaching kids is not the same as adults teaching kids. And so I would provide them feedback in a Zoom session on teaching them how to do it. So I would show them using another example. Okay, if I'm listening to Sally play, I critique Sally based on the specific areas of tone, timing, and tonguing. Or when I send them feedback, I go, today in your peer-to-peer assessment, all I want you to listen to is articulation, strength, and consistency from player to player. That's it. Don't talk about their tone. Don't talk about their tuning. Just listen to their tonguing. And so, as specific as you can be to help them, I think that's going to make the peer-to-peer stuff better. For the grading, we did it based on completeness. If they did it and I went on and they didn't write like tacos are good, then they got a complete score for it. If they wrote tacos are good, I wrote I agree. I love a good taco, and I asked them to please redo it and resubmit it. And usually they would. Some of our kids with smart music figured out if they play the computer version playing and they record it, there's a way to get it, and they were getting hundreds. And I was going in and listening and discovering that they were devious and had figured out how to basically record smart music playing it itself, and they were getting hundreds. So when they were busted for that, there were, as you can imagine, apologies and, oh, I'm so sorry, or, hey, I didn't know, I have no idea what happened. And they would go back and they would re-record that. Yeah, critique the performance, not the person. That's good, Joseph. I love that. So I think we are right at 2:45. I want to make sure you get out on time. Thank you so much. We have over 500 of you that were here today. That's really incredible for me to see that. And anything I can do to help, I'm here. You know where to find me and my email. Thank you so much.